3 days ago, I canceled my wedding in front of 180 guests. Today, I'm drinking a pina colada alone on what was supposed to be my honeymoon. Strangely, I don't regret a thing. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 32 years old, and I'm writing this from a balcony overlooking water so blue it almost looks fake. This balcony was supposed to belong to two people. Instead, it's just me. A waiter set down a pina colada a few minutes ago and wished me a wonderful honeymoon. I thanked him, smiled, and didn't bother correcting him. Around the resort, couples are everywhere. Newlyweds walk hand in hand along the beach. Husbands take photos while their wives pose near the water. Every restaurant table seems to hold some version of a happy beginning. And somehow, sitting here alone 3 days after canceling my wedding, I don't feel miserable. Mostly I feel relieved. That probably sounds strange. 3 days ago was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Instead, it became the day I finally saw my relationship for what it really was. Ryan Carter and I had been together for 4 years and engaged for one. Like every couple planning a wedding, we'd spent months obsessing over details that nobody would remember 6 months later. Flowers, menus, seating charts, invitation fonts, linen colors. If there was a decision to make, we'd probably spent an hour discussing it. Well, technically, Ryan's mother had spent an hour discussing it. Patricia treated our wedding like it was her personal masterpiece. I used to joke that I wasn't marrying Ryan. I was marrying Ryan and Patricia as a package deal. Everyone laughed. Looking back, that joke carried more truth than I realized. Still, I loved him. At least I thought I did. The venue was beautiful. A botanical garden just outside the city. White roses lined the ceremony space. A string quartet played near the entrance. The weather was perfect. 180 guests had arrived. Every detail looked exactly the way we'd imagined. That morning, my father hugged me before leaving the bridal suite. "You okay, sweetheart?" "Nervous." "Good nervous?" I smiled, the kind where I can't feel my legs. He laughed and kissed my forehead. "That's normal." At the time, I believed him. About 20 minutes before the ceremony, I was standing with my bridesmaids near the entrance path. Guests had already taken their seats. The coordinator was checking timing with the musicians. Everything was moving exactly according to schedule. Then one of my bridesmaids glanced toward the garden entrance. Her expression changed. Another bridesmaid looked in the same direction. Then another. A ripple of whispers moved through the group. I turned to see what everyone was staring at. And there she was. Vanessa Morgan, Ryan's ex-girlfriend. The woman he'd dated for 6 years before me. The woman he'd assured me was completely in the past. She wasn't dressed for a wedding. She looked like she'd stopped by on her way to run errands. Jeans, sneakers, a sweater. Jealousy wasn't even the first emotion that hit me. I was confused. Why was she here? We had security, we had a guest list, we had spent months planning every detail of this event. How had Ryan's ex-girlfriend just wandered into our wedding? Before I could ask anyone, movement across the lawn caught my attention. Someone was running. At first, I couldn't tell who it was. Then my stomach dropped. It was Ryan. Instead of standing at the altar waiting for me, he was sprinting across the garden toward Vanessa. The conversation around me faded into background noise. I watched him reach her, watched him wrap both arms around her, watched her throw her arms around him. Whatever that hug was, it didn't look like two people seeing each other unexpectedly after years apart. It looked familiar, comfortable, the kind of embrace people fall into without thinking. For several long seconds, neither of them let go. Guests were turning in their seats now. People were whispering. A few stood to get a better look. One of my bridesmaids grabbed my hand. I barely noticed, because all I could focus on was Ryan. I couldn't stop watching him. The smile on his face told me more than any explanation ever could. Months later, if someone asked me what hurt most about that moment, it wouldn't be the hug. It would be that smile. I hadn't seen him smile like that in a very long time. The smile looked effortless. Whatever he was feeling in that moment, it wasn't confusion. It was the kind of happiness people don't bother hiding. And suddenly 100 small memories started lining up in my head. My mind jumped from one memory to another. A hidden text during dinner. A conversation he'd shut down the second Vanessa's name appeared. The strange tension whenever someone mentioned she was back in town. Moments I'd dismissed at the time suddenly felt impossible to ignore. Across the lawn, Ryan still hadn't noticed me. That realization hurt more than I expected. I was about to become his wife. Yet for those few minutes, I wasn't the most important woman in his world. Vanessa was. I could have confronted him. I could have cried. I could have demanded an explanation. Instead, a strange sense of calm settled over me. The panic I expected never arrived. Instead, everything suddenly felt painfully clear. This wasn't really about Vanessa showing up. It was about Ryan's reaction to seeing her. Nobody forced him to run across that lawn. Nobody told him to forget where he was or what day it was. He made that choice on his own, and he made it in front of 180 witnesses. A bridesmaid squeezed my arm. Claire. I looked at her and smiled. The expression surprised even me. It's okay. Her eyes widened. No, it's not. Maybe she was right. But arguing with reality wasn't going to change it. I took a breath and started walking. I walked straight through the ceremony space while guests turned in their seats to watch. By the time I reached the altar, every eye in the garden was on me. Only then did Ryan finally notice me. His face changed instantly. The smile disappeared. Claire. I didn't stop walking. The microphone stood near the front row beside the officiant. I picked it up. Conversations around the garden faded until the entire venue seemed to be holding its breath. 180 people looked at me. Ryan was already moving toward me. Vanessa followed a few steps behind. I raised the microphone. Hi, everyone. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. A nervous murmur spread through the crowd. I think there's been a slight change of plans. Ryan froze. There won't be a wedding today. The reaction was immediate. Gasps. Whispers. Someone dropped a glass. A woman covered her mouth. Patricia looked like she'd forgotten how to breathe. Claire, wait, Ryan said. I finally looked at him. No. The word came out steady. Simple. Final. Then I turned back toward the guests. The reception has already been paid for. The food is ready. The bar is open. Please go enjoy the evening. Consider it a party. The silence afterward felt almost surreal. Ryan stepped closer. What are you doing? I met his eyes. For years, I'd looked at this man and imagined an entire future with him, the kind built from ordinary things like family traditions, vacations, a home, and all the years in between. Standing there, all I could see was someone who hadn't been honest with himself, let alone with me. What you should have done before today, I said quietly. His expression tightened. Claire, being honest. The words landed harder than I expected, because they weren't really for him. They were for me. I handed the microphone back to the stunned officiant. Then I turned around and walked away. Behind me, voices erupted. People started talking all at once. I heard Ryan call my name. I heard Patricia shouting. I heard chairs scraping across the ground. But I never turned around. By the time I reached the parking lot, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock my car. I sat behind the wheel for several seconds, staring through the windshield. Then my phone started vibrating. Ryan kept calling. Every time the screen lit up, his name appeared again. I declined every call. By the time I got home, the number had climbed into the dozens. Messages started arriving, then voicemails, then texts from his mother, then texts from friends. I ignored all of them. That night, I packed a suitcase. The next morning, I got on a plane. And that was how I ended up sitting alone at a honeymoon resort that was supposed to belong to two people. The funny thing is that everyone expected me to spend that week falling apart. Instead, the farther I got from the wedding, the clearer everything became. Because once the shock faded, one question refused to leave me alone. It wasn't why Vanessa had shown up. It was why Ryan had looked happier seeing her than he'd looked seeing me in months. And when I finally returned home a week later, I was about to discover that the answer was much worse than I imagined. By the second day of my trip, my phone looked like it was trying to set itself on fire. Missed calls from Ryan. Missed calls from Patricia. Texts from mutual friends. Voicemails piling up faster than I could delete them. At first, the messages sounded confused, then apologetic, then angry. By the end of the week, they had circled back to desperate. Ryan alone sent enough messages to fill a small novel. Some were short. Please call me. You're misunderstanding what happened. I love you. Others arrived in the middle of the night and stretched into paragraphs about mistakes, forgiveness, and second chances. One message kept appearing in different forms. Don't throw away 4 years over one moment. The wording changed every time, but the message was always the same. They wanted me to believe the wedding had been a single bad moment instead of the result of much bigger problems. I read those messages while sitting beside the ocean, and every time I saw that phrase, the same thought crossed my mind. People love calling something a mistake when they're the ones who made it. Nobody was calling it a mistake while I stood in a wedding dress watching my fiancé run toward another woman. I never replied. By the time my flight landed a week later, I already knew the relationship was over. The only thing left was dealing with the practical side of it. Before leaving the airport, I sent Ryan a single text. I'm coming to get my things. You can be there or not. Either way, I'm moving out today. His response arrived almost immediately. Please, Claire, we need to talk. I locked my phone and kept driving. 20 minutes later, I pulled into the parking lot of the apartment we'd shared for almost 2 years. The second I stepped out of the car, I knew he hadn't listened. His SUV was there. Patricia's car was there. And parked beside them was a vehicle I recognized immediately. Vanessa's. I actually laughed. Not because anything was funny, because somehow the situation had become ridiculous. Apparently, everyone involved in ruining my wedding had decided to gather in one place. The apartment door opened before I even reached it. Ryan stood there waiting. He looked terrible. His beard was uneven. Dark circles sat under his eyes. The expensive shirt he'd always worn to impress people looked like he'd slept in it. For a split second, I saw the man I'd spent 4 years loving. Then I remembered him smiling at Vanessa. The sympathy vanished. Claire. Ryan. His eyes searched my face as though he expected to find some sign that I might change my mind. Can we talk? No. I stepped inside. The apartment still smelled exactly the way it always had. A mix of coffee, clean laundry, and the vanilla candle I lit almost every night. For one uncomfortable moment, it still felt like home. Then I saw who was sitting in the living room. Patricia, Emily, and Vanessa. The feeling disappeared immediately. Vanessa stood near the kitchen island looking uncomfortable. Later I learned Ryan had invited her because he genuinely believed she could help explain everything and somehow convince me to stay. The fact that he thought that might work told me just how little he understood what had actually happened. I walked straight toward the bedroom. Ryan followed. Please just listen. I'm listening. No, really listen. I opened the closet and pulled out a suitcase. Ironically, it was the same suitcase I'd packed for our honeymoon. The one that was supposed to be sitting beside his. Claire, you're acting like I cheated on you. I stopped folding clothes and looked at him. What exactly do you think it looked like when you ran into your ex-girlfriend's arms at our wedding? His mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since I'd arrived, he didn't seem to have a prepared answer. It wasn't like that. I shook my head. Every person caught doing something indefensible eventually says the same thing. It wasn't like that. Even when it was exactly like that. Vanessa shifted awkwardly behind him. Ryan glanced toward her before speaking again. She showed up unexpectedly. Yes, she did. Then why won't you listen? Because Vanessa arriving unexpectedly isn't the problem. I zipped the suitcase. The problem is what happened after she arrived. That shut him up. Patricia tried taking over. Claire, enough already. I turned toward her. For years, I had tolerated her interruptions, her opinions, her need to control every conversation. That patience was gone. No, what's enough is everyone pretending I imagined what happened. You humiliated our family. The statement was so outrageous that I almost admired it. Your son ran across a wedding lawn to hug another woman, and somehow I'm the one who embarrassed the family? Patricia crossed her arms. You overreacted. I looked around the room. Then I asked the simplest question I could think of. Who ran across the lawn? Nobody answered. Who hugged their ex? Still nothing. Emily stared at the floor. Vanessa suddenly seemed fascinated by the countertop. Patricia's jaw tightened. Exactly. I went back to packing. A few minutes later, Emily finally spoke. Claire, nobody's saying Ryan handled it well. That's generous. But ending everything over one moment? I turned toward her. It wasn't one moment. Nobody rushed to defend him this time. Even Emily looked away. I looked directly at Ryan. When did Vanessa move back? His expression changed instantly. That tiny reaction told me more than any answer could. About 8 months ago. 8 months. That answer landed harder than I expected. Did you tell me? He hesitated. No. Another piece slid into place. Did you talk to her? Sometimes. How often? Ryan looked away. That was answer enough. The longer the conversation continued, the clearer everything became. Ryan kept defending the hug. I had stopped thinking about the hug altogether. What mattered now was everything that happened before it. A couple of hours later, most of my belongings were packed. The emotional speeches had started running out. The guilt trips weren't landing. Even Patricia seemed to realize she was losing ground. Then Vanessa finally spoke. Claire, I never wanted any of this. Everyone turned toward her, including me. She looked exhausted. She didn't look manipulative or smug. She looked exhausted. Then why come? She looked down at the floor. I wanted closure. She hesitated before continuing. Ryan and I exchanged messages a few times after I moved back. My jaw tightened. Vanessa looked away. I never thought it would become this. Maybe she never intended to get back together with him. But she hadn't exactly closed the door either. She never asked him to stop contacting her. Looking back, that mattered more than she wanted to admit. The word hung in the air. Closure. The same excuse people use when they reopen doors that should have stayed closed. You needed closure on my wedding day? Her face flushed. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. But it did. She nodded. Then, after a long pause, she said something none of us expected. I honestly didn't think he'd react that way. Ryan's head snapped toward her. So did everyone else's. Vanessa swallowed. I thought he'd be surprised, maybe emotional. I didn't think he'd run across the lawn. Nobody said anything for several seconds. Even Patricia looked caught off guard. For the first time that day, nobody could pretend Ryan wasn't responsible for what happened. And judging by the panic spreading across his face, he knew exactly what that admission meant. I finished loading the last box into my car 3 hours later. Ryan followed me outside. For once, there was no audience. No Patricia. No Emily. No Vanessa. Just the two of us standing beside my car. You're really leaving? The question sounded almost surreal, as if he still hadn't accepted what had happened. I looked at him for a long moment. Ryan, I left a week ago. That hit him harder than anything else I'd said all day. Because it was true. Emotionally, I'd walked away the moment he ran toward Vanessa. Everything since then had just been logistics. His eyes filled with tears. Please. I closed the trunk. You already made your choice. I love you. The words came out quickly. Desperately. And the sad part was that I think he believed them. I think Ryan loved me. The problem was that he never truly let go of the life he imagined with Vanessa. Instead of choosing one future, he spent months trying to keep both. The problem was that life doesn't work that way. I opened the driver's door. I think you loved having me in your life. His face crumpled. But if you loved me the way I deserved, you never would have forgotten I existed the second she walked through that gate. I got in the car. This time he didn't try to stop me. As I drove away, the apartment disappeared in my rearview mirror, along with 4 years of memories. A few days later, a friend named Rachel called. And the moment she asked whether I'd seen the photos from the wedding, I knew the story wasn't over. Because according to Rachel, guests had taken pictures after I left. Pictures that would prove something I'd already begun to suspect. Ryan and Vanessa hadn't stopped talking when the wedding ended. I thought the worst moment of that wedding was the one I witnessed. The photos proved I was wrong. A few minutes after Rachel called, my phone buzzed with a series of photos. The timestamp showed they had all been taken after I'd left the venue. I opened the first image. Ryan and Vanessa were standing near one of the garden pathways talking. Nothing unusual. Then I opened the second. They were still talking. The third photo made me stop scrolling. Vanessa was leaning against him. Ryan's arm rested comfortably around her shoulders. Not awkwardly. Not briefly. Comfortably. Like two people who had forgotten they were standing in the middle of the wreckage of someone else's wedding. Within days, those photos had spread through our entire social circle. Every version of the story ended the same way. The groom chased his past. The bride chose herself. Nobody needed an explanation after seeing that. My wedding! I sat on the couch staring at the screen while Rachel waited quietly on the other end of the call. Do you see what I mean now? She finally asked. Yeah, that was all I could manage. The photos hurt, but not for the reason most people would assume. By then, the relationship was already over in my mind. What hurt was realizing how many chances Ryan had been given to do the right thing. Looking at those photos, I realized the wedding wasn't a shocking mistake. It was the moment a secret stopped being private. Rachel cleared her throat. There's something else. I already knew I wasn't going to like whatever came next. What? I've heard Ryan might have been talking to Vanessa before the wedding. The room suddenly felt smaller. Not because the rumor surprised me, because it explained too much. The hidden phone screen. The defensiveness. The strange mood changes whenever her name appeared. The pieces were already there. I just hadn't assembled them yet. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every relationship leaves behind loose threads when it ends. Normally, those threads fade over time. Mine seemed determined to tighten. 3 days later, Rachel called again. This time she'd spoken to someone who knew Vanessa. According to her, Vanessa hadn't just recently returned to town. She'd been back for nearly a year. And during that year, she and Ryan hadn't been completely out of contact. Nobody knew exactly how often they spoke. But enough people knew pieces of the story that a picture was beginning to form. The more I heard, the less the wedding looked like a spontaneous disaster. It looked like the final result of a series of bad decisions that had been building for months. A few nights later, Ryan called. I almost ignored him. Almost. Curiosity won. Hello? His voice sounded rough, like someone who hadn't slept much. Thank you for answering. What do you want, Ryan? I want to explain. I leaned back against the couch. For weeks, everyone around him had been asking me to listen. Maybe it was time. Okay. The silence that followed wasn't dramatic. It sounded more like a man realizing he finally had to say things he'd been avoiding. I never wanted any of this to happen. I rubbed my forehead. That wasn't a great start. People taking responsibility usually start with what they did. People avoiding responsibility start with what happened. Did you talk to Vanessa before the wedding? The line went quiet. Not confused. Not surprised. Quiet. Finally, he answered. Yes. There it was. Simple. Direct. Impossible to explain away. How long? A few months. Hearing him say it out loud removed the last excuse I could have made for him. Not because I didn't believe it, because hearing it confirmed made everything real. You told me she showed up unexpectedly. She did? No, Ryan, she arrived unexpectedly. That's different. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. We both understood the difference. Vanessa showing up may have surprised him. Vanessa being back in his life hadn't. The conversation lasted nearly half an hour. The more Ryan talked, the clearer the pattern became. He never planned to leave me. He simply refused to let go of Vanessa while expecting me to stay. As long as nobody forced him to choose, he convinced himself he could keep both relationships alive. Then the wedding happened. And the second Vanessa appeared, his instincts answered the question he'd spent months avoiding. When we hung up, I sat alone in the dark for a long time. Not crying, not angry, mostly relieved. The uncertainty was gone. A few days later, another phone call arrived. This one came from a mutual friend named Jenna. And unlike everything before it, her news genuinely surprised me. Have you heard what happened with Vanessa? No. Jenna laughed without humor. She left town. I nearly dropped my phone. What? 2 days after the wedding. That made absolutely no sense. According to everyone around Ryan, Vanessa had been the center of this entire disaster. Then suddenly she was gone. Why? Because she was never staying. My stomach tightened. What does that mean? Jenna hesitated. Then she dropped the bomb. Vanessa is engaged. I almost thought I'd misheard her. Engaged? For about 6 months. I stared at the wall across from me. Ryan had thrown away a 4-year relationship, a wedding that cost a fortune, and the future we'd spent months planning. The worst part was that the woman he'd done it for was already preparing to marry someone else. Apparently, Ryan found out the same way everyone else did. Badly. According to Jenna, he went looking for Vanessa the night after the wedding, while Patricia was blaming me, while friends were calling me unreasonable, while Ryan was still sending messages claiming I was the woman he wanted. He was chasing Vanessa. When he finally found her, she told him the truth. She wasn't there to get back together. She wasn't there to start over. She wasn't there to choose him. She wanted closure before beginning her new life. Ryan didn't take it well. From what Jenna heard, he spent nearly an hour asking questions. Why hadn't she told him? Why had she stayed in contact? Why come to the wedding at all? Vanessa's answer was brutally simple. She wanted to know whether she'd made the right choice years ago. That was it. Hearing that explanation made the whole situation feel even more absurd. A wedding had been destroyed, an engagement had ended, and countless people had been dragged into the fallout because neither of them had fully let go of the past. All because 2 people couldn't leave the past alone. A week later, the consequences started arriving. Ryan couldn't afford the apartment by himself. When we'd lived together, I paid a larger share of the rent because my income was higher. Neither of us had ever treated it as a problem. Until suddenly it became one. One evening, Ryan's father called. It was the first time he'd ever contacted me directly. Unlike Patricia, he wasn't angry. He sounded exhausted. Claire, could we talk? I already knew where the conversation was going. After a few minutes of awkward small talk, he finally got there. Ryan's struggling. I looked out the window. Cars moved through the evening traffic below. I know. He may lose the apartment. I waited. He needs help. There it was. The request nobody wanted to make directly. I understood why his father called. He wasn't trying to manipulate me. He was trying to save his son. But some situations can't be fixed by other people. Do you know what the hardest part has been? I asked. What? Watching everyone worry about Ryan. The line stayed quiet. I continued. His family worried about Ryan. His friends worried about Ryan. Even Vanessa worried about Ryan. I swallowed. Nobody seemed worried about me. His father didn't argue. Because he couldn't. Eventually, he said softly, he regrets it. I'm sure he does. And I meant it. I genuinely believed Ryan regretted everything. But regret arrives after the damage is done. It doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't rebuild trust. It doesn't put a wedding back together. Over the next several weeks, the consequences arrived one after another. Ryan lost the apartment. His savings disappeared faster than anyone expected. Even Patricia eventually stopped blaming me and started asking her son questions he couldn't answer. Even people who had originally taken his side were running out of excuses. Then one evening, Emily called. The same Emily who had begged me not to throw away 4 years over one moment. The same Emily who had defended her brother from the beginning. The second I heard her voice, I knew something had changed. Claire. Hey. There was a pause. Then she said quietly, I owe you an apology. And what Emily told me next proved that the truth had been even worse than I realized. Because the wedding wasn't the first time Ryan chose Vanessa over me. It wasn't even the second. It had been happening for much longer than anyone knew. Emily took a breath before continuing. Do you remember your engagement party? I did. It had been almost a year earlier. Friends, family, too much champagne, and a night I had always remembered as one of the happiest moments of our relationship. Ryan disappeared for almost 40 minutes that night, she said. I frowned. At first I couldn't remember it, then the memory surfaced. Ryan had stepped outside during dinner and returned claiming a client needed help with an urgent work issue. At the time, I never questioned it. Emily's voice softened. It wasn't work. The silence between us stretched for a second. He was talking to Vanessa. I leaned back against the couch. Hearing that detail changed something for me. It confirmed that Ryan had been making choices long before the wedding day, choices he never wanted me to see. Emily apologized again before ending the call. Afterward, I sat in my apartment for a long time thinking about how many versions of the truth Ryan had given everyone, including himself. A few weeks later, another update arrived. Vanessa got married. The photos appeared online on a Saturday afternoon. The wedding photos looked perfect. The venue was beautiful, the ceremony elegant, and Vanessa looked genuinely happy. The kind of wedding Ryan and I had spent months planning. Mutual friends sent screenshots almost immediately. I didn't ask for them. By then, everyone knew what had happened. People stopped asking whether I wanted updates and started sending them automatically. Looking at those photos, I expected to feel something stronger. Instead, all I felt was exhaustion. Ryan had blown up his future over a woman who was already building one with somebody else. Not long after that, I received a message from a number I didn't recognize. The first line made me stop scrolling. Claire, it's Ryan. Please read this. I almost deleted it. Instead, I kept reading. Ryan wasn't making excuses or trying to change my mind. He was simply admitting what he had done. Ryan told me he had started therapy. He admitted he hadn't been over Vanessa. Maybe not consciously, maybe not intentionally, but enough that he kept leaving a door open that should have been closed years earlier. Then I reached the sentence that stayed with me. I thought loving you meant I was over her. I didn't realize those weren't the same thing. I read it twice, then a third time, because unfortunately, I understood exactly what he meant. Reading his message, I finally understood what had happened. Ryan never planned to lose me. He simply never dealt with the part of his past he thought had already disappeared. Ryan apologized for the messages, the secrecy, the wedding, and the pressure his family put on me afterward. For the first time, he wasn't trying to defend any of it. Then he wrote one final sentence. You deserved a man who never hesitated when it came to you. For a long time, I stared at the screen, not crying, not smiling, just sitting with it. Eventually, I typed a response. I appreciate the apology. I genuinely hope therapy helps you. But what happened changed how I see you, and that can't be undone. I don't hate you. I don't want revenge. I just don't want a future with you. I hope you find peace. Please don't contact me again. His reply arrived less than a minute later. I understand. That was the last message I ever received from Ryan Carter. Months passed. My apartment slowly started feeling like home. The walls were decorated exactly the way I wanted. Nobody argued about furniture. Nobody questioned my choices. Nobody made me feel like I was competing with a memory. I adopted a rescue dog named Rocket. The shelter volunteer warned me he was energetic. That turned out to be an understatement. One evening, after a long day at work, Rocket jumped onto the couch and dropped his favorite toy into my lap. I laughed and scratched behind his ears while he wagged his tail hard enough to shake his entire body. Rocket curled up beside me while the apartment settled into the quiet hum of an ordinary evening. For the first time in a very long time, nothing felt unfinished. Outside the windows, city lights stretched across the skyline. Somewhere out there, Ryan was living with the consequences of his choices. For the first time in years, I wasn't living with them too.